All right, well, I think we can start with this map. Shows the very early engagements in what's today West Virginia, because when the invasion of Virginia began, they came in from the west, most of them from Ohio, Indiana, a lot of Pennsylvania soldiers, but when they came in, they went from west to east. And one of the engagements that indicates on the map, Battle of Romney. Now, in the history books, it doesn't talk about any great battle here. I would call it a skirmish, but early in the war, that was considered a battle. And the northern newspapers gave a lot of discussion to that. Of course, it was Romney, Virginia at that time. This is out of New York Illustrated News. This is a copy, and it's dated December the 9th, 1861. And it shows a lot of men from the Romney area that they captured. And in the newspaper, they called them bushwhackers. Of course, as you can see, none of them had any type of a uniform or anything, but at the bottom it names all the men in this picture. Which, as I said, they were all local men. In this case, we see in the background a crutch, typical of the crutches used by the men that were disabled after the war, were used after the war. But that's just typical of what you would commonly see from injured soldiers. This short musket, after the war and even during the war, that's a Harper's Ferry. I forget the date of the manufacture of that, but they would cut the barrels down and convert the old smoothbore muskets into shotguns. They'd call them a shotgun. Usually they would try to carry a double barrel, but some of them would just pick up a musket on the field or wherever and saw the barrel off so it would be easy to transport on horseback. This piece of leather, it was some sort of horse equipment, and it has an engraved brass plate on it. It's an indication that it had cavalry use, but I can't tell you which side would have used it. This little pistol down here is a French pin-fire pistol of the 1850s, and a lot of the officers would use pin fires because it had self-contained, powder and
the cap
and everything, and the hammer would get down and hit like a little teat on the bullet, and it would fire. Of course, you had, like 8 or even more holes in the cylinder for those, but this is one of the really plain, ordinary pistol. It's not the one that Stuart carried, which are extremely rare. Now this is a Burnside carbine. It was found locally. I was able to acquire it, but it was used. It was one of the first, not muzzle, but the I can't think of it now, but you loaded the bullet from the rear. Breech loader. And like I said, this is one of the, not real early ones, but one that was made during the Civil War and issued to Union troops. This is a Smith carbine. Okay, but this Smith carbine, they were issued, it was made in Massachusetts, Chicopee Falls, They made around 30,000 of them. They were made between 1861 and 65. Very high quality, but they saw limited usage. Now, among the Union Cavalry companies that they were issued was the 3rd, 7th of West Virginia, and the 11th of Illinois, 1st Connecticut, 17th Pennsylvania, 9th Ohio, and also the 1st Massachusetts. See, these were short carbines carried on horseback. They couldn't carry the long infantry rifles on them, except yeah, I don't know who that is. James Lohr found just these 2 items here are mine. I don't see anything real significant except a local guy gave me that revolver, and I even forget the make of it.
Okay.
But it's damaged. And all right, and on this case, at the top we have a crutch. When men lost their legs, a lot of them, this was manufactured, it's homemade for a man that lost his leg up to about his knee. And they would strap it on and get around the best they could. This case right here is a shipment to Romney. This is Hampshire County, Virginia, was sent to Myers here in Romney. He was a merchant. I looked him up at one time, and he owned just a handful of, maybe 3 slaves that he used in his business. These items here in the case, most of, I think they're all local, but this Union canteen, the bullseye, it's in very good condition. I got it off of a local person. This Union powder flask, they called it a peace flask. It's made of copper, and it would have been used very early in the war. Pair of spurs back there that Captain Stump could have used, but I'm not sure, but it was in the Stump family, and I acquired that. These items over here were all from our home or in the yard or in the woods behind our house. And we have some eating utensils, some rosettes. In the middle was a bayonet was made into a digging.
Trenching tool.
Entrenching tool.
Yeah.
Now the Williams cleaner bullets were not from here in town. I forget where I got those, but I don't remember ever finding a Williams cleaner in this area.
Wow.
But in the back, there's a thimble in the house when we acquired it in 1981. Those buttons, which are mainly Union uniform buttons and insignia, they were in the house, along with a little ceremonial Confederate flag, because the local Daughters of the Confederacy had their meetings. Sue Arnold, and I have documents that showed many of the local women as members and nieces and so forth that belonged to the local Daughters.
Very cool.
That little book back there came from the Arnold house, which is ours, and we had to buy it at the auction. And of course it has Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. I have it open to their pictures, but there are a lot of family pictures in that little album. And when I first acquired it, I did have a local person there's no new paper or anything, but the album had come apart and I had her to put it back together, so you can't even tell that it was ever in two pieces.
That's cool.
Interesting picture is the two little boys there in the middle wearing Confederate uniforms. And they're probably from the White family, but that album was the Whites and then the Arnolds. Now, when I first started to practice law, had a gentleman that came into the office and says, I have a breastplate that I found in the yard of the house that you own now.
Wow.
And he asked me if I wanted to buy it. And I said, sure, but that's it. I think I paid like $100 for it. I'm not sure what they're worth now.
Which piece is that?
In the little...
That round thing?
Yes.
Well, what does that mean, a breastplate?
A breastplate, like the Union soldiers had like a strap that went down to their belts, and on that belt there would be one of those.
Something called Target.
Yeah, that's a target. Now these these other items were all found in our backyard or up in the woods behind our house. And the old pictures, which are even depicted in the Scouting the Flanks, you can see our home in the background. And also you can see tents in behind the house. Now this depicts when Hans McNeil and his son were going through Romney in the latter part of June, headed to Gettysburg. But both sides used our backyard. Of course, Jackson used our home as a headquarters, but the group from Pennsylvania also used that home as like a headquarters and an office. But John Ailes told me years and years ago, before we even, no, it was right when we bought the home in '81. He said, now if you could see through the wallpaper, the Ringolds had lists of their companies,
Wow.
the individuals, what the ranks were, but it's behind the wallpaper.
Wow.
So I think it would be great if we had some way to see through that wallpaper and find all those things. He said he remembered he either saw it or people told him about it, because he was born in the early 1900s. Governor Cornwall, he was his grandfather, so he knew a lot about local history and West Virginia history, really.
Yeah, we need to get a roster of Ringgold's
We do.
men here. That'd be interesting.
Yeah. Sure, go ahead.
All right, I'll just start with this in the background. This is a saw blade with a handle that our grandson Grant found within the last year using his metal detector. And he also found a spit that made out of two bayonets that they would put food on and rotate it. And my guess is it was probably Union soldiers that did that, because they were in our backyard really as much or even more than the Confederates.
So, Royce, how deep was that when he found it, when he detected it?
He has a very good metal detector. I think it was down over a foot in the
I
ground.
wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
And but we've also found pair of Union non-commissioned officers, epaulets, and found a lot of chains, found 3 chains together that would hold a pot over a fire. We found that, and we also found some pieces of metal, from broken pots and things, which the way they were broken up, it almost looked like they used it as a target. Fired at it. Now, this is an Austrian smoothbore, and I got this about 1975, and where I got it was Piedmont, West Virginia. That's the area of Hampshire County that's now Mineral County, and that's the only place where they raised in Hampshire County a company of Union soldiers. Now this one is marked and there's the stamp of an Ohio, just says Ohio. And there are a couple of those that this was very early in the war when the Union soldiers had moved this way, at least as far as Kaiser and Piedmont. And this, I'm as proud of this as about anything because of the very early war connection when they were in what's now Hampshire County. This is what was called a Mississippi rifle. This particular one was made in 1845. So it was the era of the Mexican War. This, made in Harper's Ferry, but issued to New Jersey troops. That was when, of course, the company was engaged in the Mexican War, so everyone was on the same side. But the fact it could have and probably was used in the Mexican War and then after the war in the American Civil War, that's what makes this this rifle interesting.
Very useful, short, stout rifle.
I consider this one of the most interesting rifles I have. It was made by the Sheets gun maker in what's now Fort Ashby, and this was under a Virginia contract. This is the type of patch box that he put on all of his contract rifles. Some of his rifles made around this time were for the Hampshire County Militia and were marked as Hampshire County Militia. This was originally a flintlock. At the time of the Civil War, this was either already in Richmond or was sent to Richmond, where they converted the flintlocks to cap lock. And I have a lot of history about this era and this type of gun. And on the end of it, it has a swamped barrel. It was cut off to 36 inches for usage in the Civil War. And the dual usage of War of 1812 and the Civil War makes it especially interesting to me, plus the fact that it was made by Frederick Sheets in what was in Hampshire County.
Absolutely. Very unique.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, in this case, in the back we have a Confederate carbine naturally used by cavalry, and it's dated 1864. Now my great-great-grandfather had one that he used, but it's dated 1863. After Gettysburg, they were down near Richmond, Charlottesville, but it was at Gordonsville. I'm not sure what was going on, but he was shot in the hip, and it crippled him. He was in the hospital in Richmond for several months, and somehow made his way back here. But some of the stories are, since he was injured and didn't make it to the end of the war, he never officially surrendered any place. He had a brother that surrendered over at Cumberland, and it's either another brother or like first cousin that also surrendered in Cumberland.
That was Richmond
Yeah, that was made in Richmond, C.S. Richmond.
Cavalry.
Mm-hmm.
That was pretty rare. It was late, right there.
Right.
I think they didn't make too many more after that.
No. This middle, it's a big bore, but it's a Mississippi rifle also. It's not turned over where you can see the great patch box, but it was made in New England. It's not Harper's Ferry made. It was made in either Vermont or Massachusetts.
Okay.
But it definitely could have been used in Mexican War and or the Civil War. This bayonet, which has a scabbard with it, was made to fit the Mississippi rifles, but neither of the ones I have on display are set up to have the bayonet on it. I found the bayonet separately.
Okay, so
Well,
this is,
they would call them sword bayonets. So,
yeah,
It's got the slot in the hilt right there on the back where it slides
right,
over the lug on
where
the
it would
barrel.
slide on.
okay.
But again, this particular Mississippi rifle was not set up for the sword bayonet. This bottom rifle was a contract Springfield rifle. It was made in Connecticut by William Muir and Company at Windsor Locks, Connecticut. But again, it's a Union arm. Now, what I found interesting about this rifle is underneath on the bottom, and you can't really see from that angle, but down here, it appears to me that it was used as a club, and I believe that to be blood on the bottom of that, where it was used to, after it was fired.
And there was the impact.
Right,
Wow.
The-
We
the-
would have never known that. if you-
exactly.
Wow. It's a light stock too, so it would stain it.
Yep.
Let's see if I can go down and get, so you think that strip of
I believe
stains?
that to be blood. Because when blood would absorb into wood, you might as well say it's impossible to get it out of the grain. Oh, and one thing I did forget to say is I located that rifle in Fort Ashby. I mean, years ago, probably around 1975, I picked it up at an auction. And that family had been, that was a Union family. Now, I don't know if they were always from Fort Ashby, but that's where they wound up.
So that would be Confederate blood?
You would think so. I believe that to be a Union bayonet. And I found it locally also. years ago, a lot of people learned that I was interested in local history.
Yeah.
And people would just come in my office and give me things that they thought I would be interested in.
Yeah.
And I was very appreciative of that.
Yes.
So,
Well, we're so blessed that you were a collector,
yeah, I'm glad I was,
or you are a collector.
yeah, there at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the, I've traveled around a good bit myself looking for these types of things, and we have one of the best. Thanks to Royce.
All right, in this case, and I forget which volume of the West Virginia Code, this is an original code, and I'm just not sure whether it's volume 1, 2, or 3, but this is the joint resolution to do the Civil War Union medals that every West Virginian that was in the Union Army was able to acquire one of these West Virginia medals. And I got this, I actually got the medal from a gentleman, I think he's pronounced Saville, but he was from Cabell County. And again, I have his medal and I have the paperwork on him where he enlisted and so forth. And I believe it says when he was discharged, but I can't read it from here. This is like a courier pouch that could have been used by either side, or even a local mailman. But it was definitely a courier pouch. Now in the back, that Confederate flag, that's one of the items that was in our home up here where they had the meetings of the daughters of the Confederate veterans. So what I like about it was here. It was definitely, and I don't know who painted it or anything.
That's great.
Next to that in the back is a checkerboard that I acquired locally. And it's the type of checkerboard that soldiers would have played on. It's wooden, it's filled in, definitely a checkerboard. Could have been used by either side.
That's great.
That bayonet back there that's painted gray, I actually found as a kid. I was like 9 or 10 years old. It was on my grandparents' farm. That's where the Sheets, the Jacob Sheets gun factory was. And I located the place where John Blue and his men camped out there with the old flintlock muskets out on Jersey Mountain at Sheets. And they were out there about 2 weeks. All of the flintlocks were converted to percussion, military. The only thing was they had no caps here that would fit those military conversions, and Winchester was the closest place. And thereafter, I think a lot of them went to Winchester and joined the regular Confederate Army. Yeah, that Union cavalry sword, that's Union. That, I forget the manufacturer of that. We can't get the case open, so I'm not sure who made that. And there's an old dug up bullet. And this is a Gallagher rifle. It is used by the cavalry. But this, what I found interesting, is this was issued to Ohio, Tennessee, cavalryman and the 3rd West Virginia. And that's why I acquired that. Okay, now these, the West Virginia medal and these other items here were issued to the gentleman I spoke of from, what county did I say? Wood County.
Right.
And I just lucked into getting all of those items at one time. I even have his wallet, but I didn't put it in here. So I wasn't sure the age of the wallet, but it looks very old. But I still have that. These individual cases, except for the Burnside bullet, were found in our yard here in Romney. Bullets, few buttons, that Spencer cartridge, someone gave that to me and said they found it locally. I can't guarantee that. Okay, the Courier pouch I purchased at the Blue Estate sale. I believe that to be an item owned by Lieutenant John Blue. I don't know what other purpose it could have been used for. Now at that same sale, he had a lot of books, and I was able to purchase several books which he has his name in. One of them was a survey book. Apparently he was like an assistant assessor, because I got one of the books where he was assessing property. And one interesting thing I found in there was my great-grandfather, William Lee Saville. It identified the dog that he owned way back when. But it was in, obviously in Springfield District, between Romney and Three Churches.
What's that on the left? To the
I'm trying to think of what that is. I know that's a heel plate. That's just a cork.
It looks to me like it might be a piece of scabbard and tack, other than the boot plate.
It looks like that's a hook.
Yeah.
Now, did it attach to a horse or what?
It
I
could
can't
also-
tell. Or even a sword, part of a sword belt. Okay, all of these rusty items were found in our backyard, including, I'm sure that's off of some kind of a stove.
Yeah.
And then some big, they look like almost as big as railroad spikes, but I'm not sure exactly what you say were, if they had, that's part of a bridle. That's the trammel I was thinking about, that soldiers would have hung up on something to cook food over, hang a pot on that.
If this would go over the horizontal, that would turn vertical, and you'd put your pot either on the bottom or the one hook or the other.
Right. And you could adjust the height of it.
Yep.
Then pieces of horseshoes, and actually horseshoes were found there. This canteen I found locally. I can't say whether it's Union or Confederate. My guess is it's Union, even though the material covering it looks more gray or butternut than blue. Anyway, the color's all faded out of it.
I'd never seen one with the cover still on it.
Right. I think that's the only one I've found with the cover still on it. The Civil War era.
Looks like two bells here.
two,
Bells or finials? These two things right here.
well, it's a little,
Oh, I don't know. I mean, they were found and I really can't identify what they are. Even that very heavy wire, I have no idea what that would have been used for, but since we found it at our home,
Sure.
I brought it in. Thought maybe someone would be able to identify it.
Right.
Yeah, Company D,
Yeah.
11th Virginia Cav.
Yeah.
James William Saville. Yeah, he was the one shot in the hip. I'm not sure his age in that picture.
That's, this draws the most attention from the people that visit the museum,
Really.
is the wall of faces.
I have, of course, the originals up at our house, he and his wife. Her maiden name was Malcolm, but his father originally was married to a Phillips and then a Moreland.
Huh.
So I'm not really sure whether his mother was a Phillips or the Moreland.
I'll be darned.
Haven't been able to narrow that down yet.
Royce, on behalf of the Fort Mill Ridge Foundation, we want to thank you for your family's heritage, your interest in history, your interest in the foundation and its mission to interpret the Civil War from all sides. And without your contribution, including your museum items on display here, on loan by the family, has made this museum one of the best in the area.
Our pleasure.